of Women's Day. We're going to take some time out to look at some pioneers and some pathfinders. And today I'm reading from the book, and I'll have some images to show you all. Pathfinders, the journeys of 16 extraordinary black souls. And today we are looking at women. I hope to get through 3 of them today, but if I don't, I at least want to cover 2 of these women today. So I hope that you have something to drink, something to nibble on. I know for some, you may be going into lunchtime or getting ready to go on break. And I do know that there are several women today who are taking off. They're participating in the protest, A Day Without Women. So I know across the country, that's a part of the news. I know across the country, there are several school districts that are actually having to shut down because of how many women are going to be out today to kind of show that women matter, right? To kind of show the importance and significance of women in our society. So that being said, praise God, I work for myself, so I'm not taking the day off, but I am going to celebrate woman and womanhood. All right, so today we are looking at, the first person we're going to look at is pioneer Clara Brown. Pioneer Clara Brown, and we're going to read a little bit about her story today. She lived from 1800 to 1855, and it says 10 years after the California 49ers, another gold rush was on. This one was in Pikes Peak country, part of western Kansas and northwestern Nebraska territories at the time in what is now Colorado. Clara Brown, nearing 60, was a witness to the 1859 Pikes Peak gold rush. Up for adventure and new vistas, Brown headed across the Great Plains that spring with a wagon train of about 24 miners. She paid for her passage with her labor, nursing, cooking, and doing laundry. 2 dusty months and 700 miles later, she was in Cherry Creek near Denver, then just a village. Clara Brown was more than 1,500 miles away from Virginia, where she was born into a life of hardship and pain. And don't get me started talking about Virginia. Oh, Virginia. Clara was 3 years old when she and her mother were on the auction block in Spotsylville County, Virginia. Now, I actually know a little bit about that area. We actually do ministry maybe about an hour and a half outside of Spotsylvania. And she was sold to a tobacco planter, then taken to his plantation in Logan County, Kentucky. Young Clara's father had been sold to somebody else. She was in her 20s when one of her twin daughters, Paulina Ann, died in an accidental drowning. She was in her 30s when, after that Logan County tobacco planter died, she and her husband Richard, son Richard Jr., and remaining 2 daughters were auctioned off. Her husband and son to cotton planters in the Deep South, and she and her daughter to different owners in Kentucky. Sidebar. So, when people talk to me about the family unit in Black America, when people talk to me about, oh, the problem with Black America is really fatherlessness or parentlessness or the family breakdown, I always like to go back and ask them the question, who do you think started the family breakdown to begin with? I just read you one, right? She's sold. She has a family. They're sold again. She's separated from her father. Her family sold. She's separated from her husband. Her and her daughters are sent one way, right? And her husband sold off in another direction. So we can't talk about current day issues and completely ignore the historicity and the foundation of where these issues come from, right? That's like throwing the rock and then hiding your hand and pretending like you had nothing to do with any of these cycles of so-called dysfunction that you see. That was a sidebar. All right. She was in her 50s when her third owner died and his daughters freed her. So she passes through 3 owners before she's finally freed. By then, she had heard that her daughter, Margaret, was dead. Now that Brown had her freedom, foremost in her mind was finding her remaining daughter, Eliza Jane, the other twin. But time and the law were not on this mother's side. Free blacks couldn't live in Kentucky permanently. There's another displacement. If Brown stayed in the state for more than a year, she could wind up on an auction block again. These are the teeny-tiny little minor details about slavery in each different province that people don't talk about. So can you imagine going through 3 owners, finally getting free, and then realizing you have to leave the state within a year to start a new life or wind up back on the auction block? Again, rather than risk re-enslavement, Clara Brown left Kentucky sometime in 1857, settling about 300 miles northwest in St. Louis, Missouri. There, she worked as a cook for a German family, the Brunners. When they moved to Kansas territory, Brown moved with them. When the family moved again, this time to California, Clara Brown stayed put and started a laundry business. A few years later came the Pikes Peak or Bus Cavalcade, with Clara Brown ready to pull up her stakes. When she did, she probably never gave it a thought that she might be one of the first, if not the first, black woman to set foot in what would become Colorado. After Clara Brown reached Cherry Creek in June 1859, she bought a 1-room cabin. From it, she ran a laundry business, and it thrived, enabling her to invest in real estate. Seeking even brisker business, she eventually settled about 4 miles west in the mining camp of Central City. There, she made money hand over fist, preparing grub along with doing laundry. Clara Brown continued to work and invest in real estate. By the time the Civil War was over in 1865, she was worth around $10,000, which would be about $150,000 today. She would have been worth even more had she not made a large donation to the building fund for a black Methodist church, and had she not fed and sheltered black and white miners and their families when they fell on hard times. In 1866, with slavery abolished, Clara Brown in her 60s made tracks for Kentucky to search for her daughter, Eliza Jane, a search that was in vain. Ready to return to the West, Brown took pity on a group of destitute blacks she encountered, folks up for making a new start in Colorado Territory, organized back in 1861 out of pieces of Kansas, Nebraska, New Mexico, and Utah. Brown paid for the whole kit and caboodle needed to get these 16 people back west with her. Then she took care of them until they got on their feet. As a reporter later noted, she never tired of turning her home into a hospital, a hotel, and a general refuge for those who were sick or in poverty. If those who made her home their home were able to pay her for what they received, she accepted it. If not, it did not matter. There came a day when this woman, called the Angel of the Rockies, needed big help herself. And so what you have here, I'm going to show you, is a lithograph made of Denver in the 1800s, so you can kind of see what their settlements might have looked like, right? So it wasn't these like huge settlements. It was much more rustic than what you might see in a Western. You know, that becomes a little later when they have the saloon and they start, you know, actually building buildings into a neighborhood. It wasn't like that. It was very, very, very rustic. And if you have been out to that area, you know that winters as well can be brutal. So let's take a look here. In 1874, several of Brown's properties, including her home, went up in flames in a fire that destroyed most of Central City. Her loss of property in the fire was not her first financial calamity. Before the war, she had lost other property in a flood. Back in 1866, during her trip to Kentucky, she had been robbed of or swindled out of $4,000. Despite these losses, Clara Brown had continued to be generous. As her funds dwindled, she did not stop helping people in need. After the fire in 1874, a friend let Brown live in a cottage he owned. From there, she got back on her feet by returning to the laundry business. Several years later, another friend moved her into a cottage in Denver. Clara Brown, suffering heart trouble, probably figured that was the last journey she would make. But 2 years later, wild horses couldn't stop her from making a 600-mile trip to Council Bluffs, Iowa. With donations from friends, Brown boarded a Union Pacific train in March 1882, bound for Omaha, Nebraska, where she transferred a horse-drawn trolley that took her to Council Bluffs. That's where her daughter, Elijah Jane, a widow, was living, a friend had written. That friend was right. Wow. After nearly 50 years, Clara Brown at last could once again wrap her arms around one of her children, a granddaughter and a granddaughter, Cindy, and both were by her side when she died 3 years later. On October 27, 1885, under the headline, Death of a Pioneer, Denver's Rocky Mountain News informed its readers that Clara Brown in her 80s, who has been lying at the point of death for several days, died last evening. The Pioneer Association was handling the funeral arrangements, the item said. The Pioneer Association was shorthand for the predominantly white Colorado Society of Pioneers, into which she was inducted in 1882. She certainly fit the criteria. She had arrived in Colorado before January 1861, when it wasn't its own territory, and she had been an asset to the state. Ever since Clara Brown fell on hard times, the Pioneer Association had been helping her out. It was the right and proper thing to do, given how much she had helped so many others over the years, and given all that she had endured. Somebody say, wow. So, you talk about somebody who has perseverance. You talk about someone who has endured, right? I'm looking at today's modern women and I'm just like, how many of us would be willing to endure what she endured? And she never really, you don't really see in her life where she ever got caught up in woe is me, right? She had this one focused goal of trying to find her last child. And it took her 50 years to be reunited with her child. And of course, then she passes 3 years later. But she never really stopped looking for her child, even though slavery had done everything it could. Don't get me started on slavery. It had done everything it could to separate her from her child. She still kept looking for her and was finally able to track her down after 50 long years. But I also think about the fact that she was very industrious, right? There wasn't a whole lot of jobs that she could do, but what she was good at, she did, right? What she was good at making money at, she did. She laundered people's clothes. She, cooked for the different, obviously the different travelers that were traveling to the area. She never stopped being industrious. She never stopped trying to make a way for herself. So somebody say, woman power. That was inspiring. I don't know about anybody else, but that was inspiring to me. All right. Some of the things, another pioneer that was kind of a contemporary, yes. Another pioneer that was a contemporary at the time was a 6 foot tall native of Tennessee, 200-pound Mary Fields. She became a legend in Montana. She picked up the nickname Stagecoach Mary. I've heard that before, because for 8 years she was a U.S. mail carrier, a job she started when she was about 60 years old. Field's route was between Cascade and St. Peter's Mission, about 15 miles away. She could use a 4-horse lash with a dexterity that made a man green with envy, and she could also use a 6-shooter with equal accuracy, said Montana's Anaconda Standard in April 1913 in an article about Stagecoach Mary's 83rd birthday. So, ever wonder why any of these westerns don't include some of these characters? You know, that goes back to, unfortunately, the whitewashing of history. All right, we're moving on to our next woman for today. Her name is Cerreta, I think I'm saying that right, Cerreta Jones, and she was a concert singer. Now, of course, everybody knows about Marian Anderson and some of the other larger known concert singers, but we're going to talk today about Cerreta Jones. She lived from 1868 to 1933. She had performed at New York City's Madison Square Garden. Yes, she is very pretty. Madison Square Garden and Carnegie Hall. Her voice had entranced music lovers in Jamaica, Barbados, Grenada, and other islands in the West Indies. She had even sung in the White House for President Benjamin Harrison in the Blue Room. Now, in late 1894, this phenomenal soprano was to embark on a European tour. What a long way, a very long way she had come. Here's another one. Born in Virginia, a few years after the end of the Civil War, Cerreta Jones was the daughter of a couple born into slavery, a couple who split up when she was a child. By then, Providence, Rhode Island was home. So here's another one. Another Virginian whose family was split up by what? Slavery. Song was her solace and source of joy early on. I can never remember the time when I did not sing, she told the San Francisco Call in 1896. I used to sing to myself as a child because I loved music. Young Cerreta sang at home, in church, in school. She sang year after year, but she didn't have professional training until she was a teenager. With whom she studied voice and music then and later is a bit sketchy. In any event, over the years, Cerreta continued to sing in church concerts and with amateur bands. In May 1885 at Providence Armory Hall, she shared the stage with Flora Batson, an already established black concert singer. Cerreta Jones was soon a sensation in New England and then elsewhere in the country. Her repertoire ranged from folk songs like the Scottish Coming Through the Rye to operatic works such as Caro Nome from Giuseppe Verdi's Rigoletto, and an aria from Giacomo Meyerbeer's La Africaine. In her silk, satin, and velvet gowns, Jones looked as exquisite as she sounded. Her earrings were fabulous too. When she set sail for Europe in 1895, she was one of the highest paid black entertainers in the States. She was grossing about $18,000 a year. At the time, many Americans earned near to $400 a year. So that shows you her huge pay gap. Cerreta Jones' 9-month European tour included performances in London, Paris, and several German cities. Her voice is clear and true up to the highest tones, said a German critic who attended Jones' concert at Berlin's Winter Garden Theater on February 19, 1895, at the start of her tour. All right. In her time. On May 18, 1896, the U.S. Supreme Court handed down its decision in the case known as Plessy versus Ferguson, ruling that maintaining separate but equal facilities from playgrounds and movie theaters to schools for whites and people of color was constitutional. Local and state Jim Crow laws and customs already existed during her time. After the Plessy decision, they increased and were more rigorously enforced. So she was doing all of this and performing in a time where the separate versus equal verdict was in play, right? It says in 1910, about 90% of blacks in the United States lived in the South. 90%. By 1916, a great exodus was underway, with blacks seeking better paying jobs, better housing, and less racial oppression. Millions left cities such as Bessemer, Alabama, Gulfport, Mississippi, New Orleans, and Houston for West Coast cities like Los Angeles, Midwestern cities like Chicago and Detroit, and the Northeast like New York and Philadelphia. This was called, we know, the Great Migration, and lasted for decades. There is a book written about this. I forget the young lady's last name, but the title of the book is The Warmth of Other Suns. The Warmth of Other Suns. And she begins to detail how blacks migrated from the south to the north. Here is a picture of her again on one of the posters. It's called The Black Patty, is the title on the poster. And it says the greatest singer of her race. So there's a poster of her during the time where they were advertising for her concerts. The greatest singer of her race. Wow. We're still debating about things like that even now, right? We say, why couldn't she just be called the greatest singer? Why we have to bring her race into it? Yeah, that was her bling. So that's her bling, and that's actually several different awards that she would wear as she went to sing. Because remember, she's living in a time where people don't think black people can do anything. She's living in a time where black inferiority is the thing that's being bandied about. So think about the fact that she probably went into certain arenas, right, having to wear her medals on her chest. That would be like, right, that would be like some of the singers of today having to carry around all of their Grammy awards, right, or their Dove awards, or their Academy awards, just to say, see, I'm good too. I'm as good as everybody else. See all of my awards, see all of my medals. Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. But that's the time that she was living in. Let's continue and close out with her story here. The applause which greeted the close of each number in her shows was a tribute to a talent which is quite independent of color or nationality, a talent worthy of admiration for its own sake alone. I'm so glad somebody wrote that about her. Jeez. Germany's emperor at the time, William II, was among the notables who saw Jones perform in Berlin. He reportedly had a diamond cross made for her as a show of appreciation. Later, when Jones made her London debut, Albert Edward, the Prince of Wales, was in the audience. Cerreta Jones had been back in the States about 6 months when a reporter with the San Francisco Call interviewed her in her rooms at a swanky hotel, the Russ House. Her answer when asked if she wanted to perform on stage in operas, yes, she most certainly did. But Jones didn't think this dream would come true because she traveled so much. Besides, she couldn't see a white opera company opening its doors to a black artist. Why are we still having these conversations in 2017? Anyway, at the time, there were no black opera companies. Pressing the matter further, the reporter suggested that with clever application of makeup and wigs, she might be able to get into an opera company by pretending to be white. What you say? Why are we still having this conversation in 2017? Lord have mercy. Cerreta Jones balked at that. Try to hide my race and deny my own people? Well, at least she had common sense. Oh, I would never do that. After a pause, she added, I am proud of belonging to them and would not hide what I am even for an evening. My God, this lady better preach. I think I'm going to have to quote her today on my social media. She said, I am proud of belonging to them and would not hide what I am even for an evening. My God. Just let that settle in. Woo, Lord. How people are hiding who they are for a record contract. I'm going to leave that alone. That's some good tea right there, though. She said, why? Why would I do that? Wait a minute. I'm a credit to my race. You know, that's a stereotype they would say. I'm a credit to my race. I'm the best black singer. But you want me to powder my face and make me try to pretend to be white just for a night so I can get into a white opera company to sing? No, thank you. I know my worth. I know my value. I'm appreciated all over the world. But I come back to the United States, and this is the foolishness that y'all want to ask me to do. Oh my goodness. I have told some people already. Some of you all are going to have to leave the country in order to really be appreciated for what you bring to the table. Don't be afraid. Now, I know they've got all these crazy bans going on where now they're, you know, to the point where they are refusing to let black citizens back into the country, most deaf, because he had a Muslim name. But go where you're appreciated, please. Go where you're celebrated.